Matt Walsh filed a lawsuit to silence Jonathan Roumie, convinced that both the media and the courtroom were just extensions of his microphone. But in less than 10 seconds, one former aide exposed a carefully orchestrated operation and turned the entire case on its head. It didn't arrive as a whisper. It landed like a lightning strike. Matt Walsh sues Jonathan Roumie for defamation. That headline exploded across every major outlet. Within minutes, it was viral. Social media ignited. Cable news scrambled into 24/7 coverage. Podcasts, blogs, panel shows. Everyone had something to say. The internet tore through conspiracy threads before a single journalist had even read the complaint. But it wasn't just the lawsuit. It was who was suing and who had been sued. Matt Walsh, right-wing firebrand, author, provocateur, and proud agitator, known for his combative rhetoric and calculated outrage, had gone after Jonathan Roumie, the deeply respected actor best known for playing Jesus in The Chosen. A man of quiet strength, a voice of peace, and to many, a rare moral compass in Hollywood. And it wasn't about a role or a fictional script. It was about something Jonathan said, not in a sermon, not in a faith-based video, but during a live televised roundtable, just 3 weeks before the filing. The topic, power and narrative in the post-truth era. The timing couldn't have been worse or more precise. Walsh was knee-deep in promoting his latest media venture, already under scrutiny for misleading edits and questionable sources. Roumie had just returned from a speaking tour about truth, mercy, and public integrity. Tensions were already sky-high. This lawsuit? It was a match struck over gasoline. Reporters dove in instantly. The official complaint, filed in a federal district court in San Diego, cited Jonathan's on-air statement claiming that Matt Walsh had weaponized faith not to heal but to manipulate, and that he was coordinating media cycles to discredit people of conscience. That final line, the accusation of orchestrated media attacks, was what Walsh's lawyers claimed caused irreparable reputational harm. Audiences split within hours. Walsh's followers called it a defense of dignity. Roumie's supporters called it censorship dressed as litigation. And Jonathan? He didn't flinch. The morning after the lawsuit broke, he stepped out of his modest New York walk-up. Coffee in hand, navy coat, calm eyes, cameras waiting. He looked straight at them and said quietly, "If this was meant to scare me, they haven't been paying attention." He smiled, gently but firmly. "I've played men who walk to their death for the truth. I think I can handle a courtroom." But behind closed doors, his legal team was more cautious. This wasn't just a PR storm. This was real. Depositions, discovery, cross-examinations, exposure. The exact environment Matt Walsh thrived in. Jonathan's lead counsel, Marcia Tillman, a seasoned defamation attorney with a reputation for dismantling bullies in expensive suits, gave it to him straight on their first strategy call. "They don't want money," she said. "They want your voice in chains. They want to drag your name through the dust, in prime time, with applause." Jonathan took a sip of water, then responded softly, "Then I guess we better give them something they can't edit." But he knew the cost. Within 48 hours, right-wing influencers began dredging up everything. Footage from old interviews, behind-the-scenes videos from The Chosen, sermons he never gave but was falsely credited with, misquotes, AI-edited clips, all served up in a frenzy. In the midst of the storm, Jonathan sat quietly with his spiritual director on the rooftop of his Los Angeles apartment. The sky buzzed with helicopters. "Are you ready for this?" the director asked. Jonathan exhaled. "People need to see what happens when conscience isn't convenient anymore. Maybe if we weather this, someone else won't have to." But that was before the courthouse was surrounded, before an unexpected witness shattered the narrative with 9 seconds of truth. The real trial hadn't even begun, but already something holy and volatile had entered the air. But most people missed the why. The clip, Jonathan's full, reasoned remarks, was sliced and twisted, edited out of context, stripped of follow-up dialogue, stripped of nuance, stripped of integrity. It was reposted with outraged captions designed to make it sound like a personal attack, not a principled warning. The internet didn't care. The narrative spread like a virus. Unstable, jealous, craving relevance. That's how they framed Jonathan Roumie. None of it made sense. Not to anyone who had actually watched him speak. But truth moves slowly, and outrage moves fast. Late one evening, back in his modest downtown office, Jonathan sat in silence with his team, rewatching the full roundtable. The room was quiet. He paused the clip and turned to Theo, his longtime friend and strategist. "Did I say anything false?" Theo leaned back in his chair, calm, measured. No, but you poked the nest. Jonathan sipped his chamomile tea, thoughtful, not defensive. Maybe the nest needed poking. What he didn't know, what no one in that quiet room could have known, was that someone else had been watching, someone on the inside, and they'd seen this playbook before. This person wasn't carrying rumors or anonymous tips. They had documents, names, emails, memos, a timeline, a digital trail, a bomb waiting to go off. But before that truth could surface, Matt Walsh's team made their first move. And it was loud. The lawsuit wasn't clumsy. It was sharpened like a blade, strategic, calculated, filed in federal court on a quiet Tuesday morning, released in tandem with a press statement authored by Walsh's legal pit bull, Theodore Langham, a well-known fixer for political celebrities and billionaires. The statement read, Mr. Roumie's comments were not only false but deliberately constructed to injure Mr. Walsh's reputation and personal safety. We will pursue all legal avenues to address this malicious behavior. Those weren't just legal words, they were code. By mid-afternoon, right-wing media figures were parroting the exact phrasing: calculated, dangerous, reckless disregard. The machine was running. The message was clear. Matt Walsh, the righteous culture warrior, had been targeted by a Hollywood Christian pretending to be humble. And Walsh? He had no choice but to respond. Behind the scenes in a glass-towered media war room in Century City, rented for this precise moment, his team was already rolling, clips edited, talking heads briefed, influencers handed Twitter-ready sound bites disguised as original thought. The narrative was scripted. Jonathan Roumie, soft-spoken, cloak-wearing Jesus actor, is actually a media opportunist trying to cancel real men of truth. And Matt Walsh, still mostly off camera, but not absent. Sources inside confirmed he personally approved the video packages. He greenlit the legal language. He demanded weekly updates. Still, his attorney stuck to the script. Mr. Walsh is simply defending his privacy and integrity. That line, exactly that line, was repeated on every channel that would take the call. But behind closed doors, the tone was different. 3 days after the filing, Matt Walsh sat at a long marble conference table in Langham's private office, tablet in hand, reading through headlines, tweets, screenshots of reactions. He looked up, face unreadable. Why hasn't he responded yet? Langham didn't flinch. Because he's not stupid. He won't play his hand too early. Walsh narrowed his eyes. Well, he needs to understand something. This isn't just about the words. It's about control. It's about teaching people like him to stay in their lane. He set the tablet down. The silence in the room was sharp. Langham didn't respond. He didn't have to. He knew what it meant to go after someone like Jonathan Roumie, a man with integrity, with faith, with a quiet kind of strength that didn't break easily. But what Walsh and his team underestimated, what they never expected, was that Jonathan wouldn't blink. No apology, no clarification video, no private call to calm the waters. He let the storm swirl, let them spin their version. While his own team did what they did best, they started digging. Marcia Tillman, Jonathan's counsel, had seen this kind of battle before. Wealthy plaintiffs, vague allegations, loud legal fireworks. But she'd also seen the same pattern every time. When the noise is loudest, there's usually something hiding underneath. And if you waited long enough, someone always cracked. On a late-night call, her voice was steady. This isn't just about defamation, Jonathan. This feels like a warning shot. Jonathan's voice came back soft, deliberate. Then let's fire one back. That's when Marcia made her move. She reached out to a former communications aide, someone who had worked under both Republican and Democratic administrations, someone who had been part of the media narrative machine from the inside, recently pushed out of a powerful PR firm with ties to Walsh's donor network. His name wasn't public, not yet, but his message, crystal clear. I have the documents, and I'm ready to speak. No one in that moment realized how much those 9 seconds of truth would change everything. But before the bomb could detonate, the defense team gathered quietly, far from D.C., far from the noise, in a plain-rented conference room in downtown El Paso. The air was still, laptops open, coffee cold, tension warm. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, arms folded, quiet, listening. Marcia clicked through a no-frills PowerPoint, bullet points, case law, strategy. They're painting you as emotional, undisciplined, but look at their filing. It's hollow, vague. This whole thing is built on perception, not facts. Across from her, Theo flipped through printed social media threads. Look at this. Same phrasing, same hashtags, posted within minutes. Desperate actor attack. Half these accounts are bots or plants. Jonathan read the printout silently, then set it down. So we've got a pattern. He looked up. Now we just need proof of intent. Marcia raised her eyes, and everything changed. We might have it. She locked the door, silenced her phone, opened her laptop, and read the notes from her call with the former insider. Emails, memos, timelines, a digital map of a campaign, not hearsay, not speculation, internal communication, coordinated, controlled, cold. Jonathan was skeptical. Why would he help us? Marcia shrugged. He said it got too dirty, said he didn't sign up to destroy people for speaking the truth, said what they did to you, That was the line. Theo raised an eyebrow. Sounds like guilt. Jonathan looked out the window. Or maybe he just wants clean hands before the dam breaks. Either way, they agreed they'd hear him out. A Zoom call was arranged. No recording, no names, just one voice. Calm, measured, precise. And what that voice said would soon crack the foundation of the entire lawsuit. The man's voice was steady, older, measured, without ego or embellishment. He didn't ramble. He didn't dramatize. He simply told the truth. There's a file, he said. It's called Strategic Public Retaliation. Inside the file, Jonathan Roumie's name, media targets, talking points, suggested headlines, coordinated messaging, and the most damning line, Jonathan's quote, the one that allegedly sparked the lawsuit, was already in the memo before the panel ever aired. It wasn't just Walsh's idea, the man said, but he signed off on it. Personally, it's in the metadata, authenticated. Theo sat forward, his voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. You're saying Matt Walsh greenlit a media campaign to discredit Jonathan Roumie and then sued him for responding to it? The man didn't blink. Yes, and I'll testify, but I want protection. Silence. Jonathan didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Then he turned to Marcia. If he's telling the truth, he said, his voice low, this isn't just a lawsuit. This is calculated deception, and I'm not staying silent. The next morning, Marcia Tillman filed a motion requesting the court allow a sealed, anonymous witness to testify. The filing sent shockwaves through the legal and political world, not just because of what it contained, but because of what it implied. Who else was involved? Who had approved the memo? And what kind of system was operating behind the headlines? Journalists speculated. Walsh's allies scrambled, but the judge, no nonsense, brisk and sharp-minded, granted the motion within 24 hours. Jonathan remained composed, attended every hearing, unshaken, calm, steady. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. He began appearing at public forums, town halls, and community events, never once addressing the lawsuit directly. Instead, he spoke about truth, about silence, about the cost of conscience. Privately, though, he was preparing for war. The night before the first hearing, he met Theo in the lowest level of a downtown parking garage. Quiet, dim, echoing with cold. Theo leaned against the hood of a black sedan. You sure about this? Jonathan didn't flinch. If they wanted quiet, they should have picked someone else. He looked toward the shadowed stairwell. They thought the courtroom was their battlefield. They forgot I've walked into harder ones. San Diego's federal courthouse looked ordinary. Glass, concrete, just another government building. But that morning, the sidewalks were overflowing. News vans, protesters, supporters. Some held signs quoting Jonathan. Others just stood in silence. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a reckoning. Matt Walsh was not there. His team said he was monitoring remotely. Jonathan Roumie was. He arrived at exactly 8 o'clock a.m. Tailored charcoal suit, no entourage, no theatrics, just presence. Camera shutters exploded like thunder. He didn't stop, didn't wave. He walked straight through the courthouse doors, deliberate, focused, at peace. Inside, the air felt electric and still, like a breath waiting to exhale. The gallery was full. Reporters lined the back wall. On the plaintiff's side, Theodore Langham, Matt Walsh's lead counsel, surrounded by 3 attorneys, tablets open, legal pads brimming with pre-highlighted strategies. On the defense, Marcia Tillman, calm, precise. Jonathan sat beside her, focused, prayerful, unreadable. Theo behind him, anchor, brother, witness. At exactly 9:06 a.m., Judge Bernice Kaplan entered, a former prosecutor, known for speed and fairness. She scanned the room like someone who'd seen 100 games like this before and had no patience for performance. No greetings, no smile. "Let's begin," she said. Langham stood first, his voice polished and theatrical. "Your Honor, Mr. Walsh comes not as a public figure, but as a private citizen defending his name. Mr. Roumie's statements were reckless, inflammatory, and knowingly false. He suggested my client was orchestrating media campaigns without evidence. The damage to Mr. Walsh's character is significant. He listed Jonathan's remarks, tweets, interviews, trying to paint him as unstable, overreaching, emotionally provocative. Then Marcia stood. No notes, no props, no PowerPoint, just her voice. This case is not about reputation. It's about power. My client answered a public question with truth based on observable patterns and credible sources. This lawsuit was not filed in defense. It was filed in fear. It is a weapon meant to punish speech, not to seek justice." She glanced toward the bench. "And we will prove that Matt Walsh's team initiated a coordinated disinformation campaign to discredit Jonathan Roumie long before any lawsuit was filed." Judge Kaplan raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Witnesses began. First, Walsh's team presented a digital media analyst, slides, heat maps. He claimed Jonathan's remarks led to online threats against Matt Walsh. Marcia's cross-examination was surgical. "Can you prove those threats came from people who support Mr. Roumie?" "Not directly." "Did he ever encourage violence?" No, Sitka. To clarify, he spoke and the internet did what the internet does?" The witness hesitated. "In a manner of speaking, yes. Not a knockout, but not a win for Walsh either." Next up, a behavioral analyst. He described Jonathan's tone as intense, provocative, emotionally manipulative. It sounded more like a YouTube comment than expert testimony. Even Judge Kaplan looked unimpressed. Marcia objected, once, then again. The second was sustained. And Jonathan? He sat still, not tense, not worried, just anchored, watching, waiting. Late in the day, Judge Kaplan called for a short recess. Theo's phone buzzed. A message, one line. "He's in, he'll testify." Theo passed it to Marcia. She read it, then leaned toward Jonathan. "It's happening." Jonathan didn't react. He just inhaled, slow, steady. The witness they'd been praying for, the one with the truth, was coming. The next morning, the courthouse was charged. Not noisy, but pulsing. Something had shifted. Word had leaked. Jonathan Roumie's legal team had added a sealed witness to the record. No name, no testimony, just questions. Online, theories exploded. A former White House aide, a PR insider, a media whistleblower. No one guessed the truth. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Judge Kaplan took the bench. No hesitation, no theater. "Defense may proceed." Marcia stood. "Your Honor, we call Mr. Garrett Wynn to the stand." Silence. Chairs shifted, eyes darted, names whispered. Garrett Wynn. Not a celebrity, not a talking head. But in D.C. and campaign media circles, his name had weight. A former communications director who had served under both Republican and Democratic administrations, fluent in shadow strategy, known but never quoted, present but never visible. He walked in with a quiet authority, navy suit, wire-rimmed glasses, a man trained to remain invisible, but now walking straight into the light. He took the stand, was sworn in, sat down, hands folded, jaw set. No theatrics, just truth. Marcia approached slowly, her voice steady. "Mr. Wynn, can you tell the court your most recent professional position?" "Until February of this year," he replied. "I served as senior media consultant at Parkbridge Strategies. Before that, I was director of special communications projects under both the Trump and Biden White Houses." Langham stood instantly. Objection, relevance. Judge Kaplan didn't flinch. "Overruled. Continue." Marcia nodded. "Mr. Wynn, during your time at Parkbridge, were you made aware of a media campaign targeting Mr. Jonathan Roumie?" Wynn didn't even blink. "Yes." The air in the courtroom thinned. Even the sound of breathing seemed to pause. Marcia stepped forward, measured, surgical. "Was Mr. Matt Walsh involved in that campaign?" "Yes." Reporters' heads jerked upward. Cameras refocused. Even the galleries shifted in their seats. "How was he involved?" Wynn leaned slightly forward, still calm, still composed. He signed off on a document titled Strategic Public Retaliation. It outlined targeted messaging, approved media outlets, influencer briefings, and a list of priority individuals to be discredited. Mr. Roumie was on that list. Langham stood again, agitated. Objection. The term retaliation is prejudicial. Judge Kaplan raised a single hand. He is quoting the document. Sit down. Wynn continued, his voice more direct now. The memo included preferred descriptors for Mr. Roumie, words like unhinged, obsessed, deceptive. It provided rollout schedules, suggested headlines, influencer talking points, and sample social engagement template. Aufgereizt. Mr. Walsh reviewed and approved the final draft. Marcia let the silence hold, then asked the final question. How long before the lawsuit was filed was that memo approved? Wynn didn't hesitate. 3 weeks, 9 seconds. That's all it took. 9 seconds of unfiltered, undeniable testimony, and the entire foundation of Matt Walsh's lawsuit crumbled. What had been sold to the court as a righteous defense was now exposed as a staged ambush, a trap constructed by Walsh, triggered by Roumie's truth. Langham stood for cross. Are you testifying for political gain? No. Have you been compensated? Not a dollar. Then why are you here? Garrett Wynn finally looked him in the eye. Because there is a line, and I watched them cross it. Silence fell across the room. Judge Kaplan recessed for lunch, but no one moved. It was like the truth had weight, and it needed time to settle into the furniture, the gallery, the court record, the soul of the room itself. Jonathan didn't say a word, just stared ahead. Then finally he turned to Marcia. They came here thinking this would be my loss. Marcia gave him a razor-thin smile. Turns out they built their case out of their own weapon. The courtroom reconvened after lunch, still quiet, but not calm, not peaceful. There was pressure now, like something under the floor had cracked, and everyone was waiting to see what would collapse. Judge Kaplan returned and cleared her throat. Counsel, I want to be absolutely clear. The testimony provided by Mr. Wynn carries serious implications. I expect both parties to proceed with caution. Continue. Marcia stood again, this time with only one folder. No notes, no laptop, just the fallout in her hands. Your Honor, she began, we are submitting into evidence the full internal memo referenced by Mr. Wynn, dated February 9th, signed by Mr. Matt Walsh. 3 pages detailing deliberate strategic targeting of my client, Mr. Roumie. We also submit metadata showing the file was accessed and modified by 2 members of Mr. Walsh's personal communications team within 48 hours of Mr. Roumie's televised appearance. Langham didn't object. He couldn't. The memo was handed to the clerk, then passed to the judge. Kaplan scanned the first page, then flipped, slowly. No change in her expression, just her eyes, tracking, processing. She reached the last page. The plaintiff aware that this document exists. Langham stood, straightened his jacket. Your Honor, we are currently reviewing the document's authenticity and reserve the right to respond following forensic examination. His voice was low, practiced, but no one in the room believed it would matter. Because what came next wasn't legal, it was viral. The memo, whether leaked by a staffer, strategist, or someone who just couldn't stomach the lie, was already out. Screenshots exploded across social media. Reddit threads dissected every sentence. Cable anchors didn't just reference it, they read it aloud. Live. Within 30 minutes, the phrase strategic public retaliation was trending. This is Watergate with better lighting, one commentator said. Another joked, they tried to silence Jonathan Roumie and handed him the microphone instead. In the back seat of a black SUV in the courthouse parking garage, Jonathan sat silently. Theo climbed in beside him. Phone in hand, he passed it over. Jonathan scrolled, his name everywhere. Messages flooding in, support, gratitude, outrage, but not at him. Even people who once dismissed him were speaking out, not because they suddenly agreed, but because they recognized something universal had just unfolded. A powerful man tried to crush a voice of conscience and got caught. Jonathan looked out the tinted window. I never wanted this to be about me, he said quietly. I just wanted people to see the game, to see how the board gets moved behind closed doors. Theo leaned in, voice low. They're seeing it now. Back at Walsh's headquarters, things weren't calm. Phones rang unanswered. Scheduled interviews were canceled. One staffer reportedly quit on the spot. Langham issued a vague press release about coordinated attacks on free speech, but no one was buying it because 9 seconds of truth had undone weeks of lies. This wasn't about protection. It had always been about control, and it had backfired hard. By the next morning, the crowd outside the courthouse had doubled. Protesters and supporters stood shoulder to shoulder, but the signs had changed. Truth defamation. Power fears light. We stand with Jonathan. And Jonathan? He walked in exactly the same way. No grand gesture, no entourage, just head high, eyes calm. He wasn't walking into the fire anymore. He was walking through it and still standing. They no longer looked like attorneys. They looked like consultants in damage control. And Matt Walsh? Nowhere. No statement, no video, not even a photograph. People started noticing. He hadn't made a single public appearance since Garrett Wynn took the stand. Rumors swirled. 2 advisors fired. A private jet returned to Nashville. A shouting match with a major donor. Nothing confirmed, which of course made it all worse. Judge Kaplan re-entered and wasted no time. "Let me remind both parties," she said. "This case is still active. Any further theatrics, intentional or otherwise, will not be tolerated." But everyone in the room already knew. The damage had long since escaped the courtroom's 4 walls. Marcia stood again, one folder in hand, measured, unshaken. "Your Honor, in light of yesterday's sworn testimony, the defense respectfully moves for dismissal on the grounds of malicious prosecution. Additionally, we request a formal inquiry into the misuse of judicial process as a tool for political retaliation." Langham didn't even stand. He simply leaned into the mic. "We object to the characterization and reserve our response until our review of this submitted evidence is complete." It was a stall, a tired one, and everyone felt it. Whatever fire had once fueled this lawsuit had become nothing more than delays wrapped in excuses. By noon, the headlines had already crystallized. Walsh lawsuit against Roumie crumbles in court. Leaked memo confirms Walsh-approved targeted smear campaign. Jonathan Roumie turns defense into national moment. Outside, it was chaos, but not of outrage, of awakening. People who had never before watched a single court hearing were now glued to live streams. College students, retirees, office workers on lunch breaks, watching, quoting, debating. The memo, the 3-page weapon-turned confession, had been downloaded, circulated, annotated like scripture by political junkies, professors, and students. In a bar in Sacramento, 2 middle-aged men watched the coverage on a mounted screen. "You see this?" one said. "They tried to use the system to punish a man for saying what everyone else was thinking." His friend nodded. "They tried, and he lit them up with receipts." Even conservative media began to flinch. Some anchors subtly pivoted. Others floated the phrase "ill-advised" like a lifeline. One headline across a formerly defiant network read like a quiet surrender. Did Matt Walsh get bad legal advice? No one was stepping in to clean it up. Not convincingly. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Jonathan Roumie took no victory lap. 2 days later, he hosted a community town hall in Queens. He didn't mention the case, unless someone else did, and when they did, his answer was always the same. This was never about winning. It was about telling the truth and not backing down. But his silence didn't stop others from speaking. 6 members of Congress released a joint statement condemning the use of litigation to silence public voices. Civil rights attorneys called the case a landmark moment, a warning that lawsuits aren't shields from accountability. Across college campuses, Roumie's name became part of curriculum. Political science professors cited him in real-time lectures about how defamation law could be twisted into a political weapon, and how one calm, clear, inconvenient truth could tear the whole thing down. As for Garrett Wynn, he vanished. No interviews, no press tour, just gone. But his name lingered. He trended for 48 hours. Some called him a patriot. Others questioned his motives. But no one denied the impact. One journalist wrote, "He walked in quiet, he walked out historic." And back in DC, the political class took note. No one said it aloud. But behind closed doors, the rules had shifted. Jonathan Roumie was no longer just a respected figure in faith and film. He was now a presence, a force, someone you didn't come for lightly. As the legal smoke began to clear, the personal consequences quietly rose. Matt Walsh flew back to Nashville. No cameras, no crowds. A local reporter said he was met at the tarmac not by advisors, but by his wife. His media team stopped publishing content for 3 days. The tone at Walsh HQ? Muted. Staff were reassigned, some let go, and Walsh himself went quiet. No tweets, no videos, no podcasts. Inside the house, sources said, he wasn't speaking much at all. 2 days after his return, he sat across from a longtime strategist on a private patio. Whiskey glass untouched, laptop closed. The strategist lit a cigar, exhaled, and finally said it. "You should have kept it quiet." Walsh didn't respond, just stared into the distance. "You gave him the spotlight." the strategist continued. You had the advantage, and you gave it away. Walsh's voice came back low, resigned. I just wanted him to stop talking. The strategist raised an eyebrow. That's not how this works. You go after a man like Jonathan Roumie, you better make damn sure he doesn't have receipts. The silence that followed wasn't just defeat. It was disruption of narrative, of image, of power. For a movement that had controlled the media cycle with precision, they had been outplayed by stillness, humility, and truth. And back in Jonathan's world, the fallout wasn't political, it was personal. One night he sat in the bed of an old Ford pickup with his son, blankets laid out, folding chairs leaned back. Somewhere outside Trenton, sky above them black and clean, his son handed him a ginger ale. How you holding up? Jonathan took a long sip, then shrugged. I don't feel like I won, I just feel tired. His son nodded. Truth'll do that. Doesn't shout, just sits heavy. Jonathan looked up at the stars. I just wanted people to see what happens behind the curtain, how power moves the story, how it punishes anyone who speaks out of turn. His son looked at him. Now they know, because you didn't fold. That part was true, he hadn't, but it had cost him something. Calls poured in, networks, publishers, publicists, feature offers, primetime interviews, book deals. He turned them all down. He wanted quiet, but Theo never stopped. He was already archiving the entire case. Every filing, every headline, the full memo, the metadata. He wasn't just preserving it, he was building something. He wasn't just preserving history, he was building something. What exactly Theo hadn't said, but in one late-night strategy meeting, he leaned across the table, looked Jonathan in the eye and asked, what if this isn't the end of the fight? What if this was just the warning shot? For what's next? The words lingered in the stillness. Jonathan exhaled, slow, deep, tired. Then we have to be ready, just like this one. But beneath his calm voice, beneath the peaceful exterior, there was something deeper. Not fear, not pride, but sadness. Not for himself, but for the state of things. One quiet afternoon, in a rare moment of unguarded honesty, Jonathan said it aloud. People shouldn't have to be brave just to tell the truth. But somehow, that's become the price. Theo nodded slowly. For a moment, neither said a word. In the quieter hours, Jonathan sometimes thought about Garrett Wynn. What made him speak? What did he risk? He never got to thank him. The lawyers had made sure of that. No messages, no contact, nothing that could be called coordination. But he hoped Garrett knew that those 9 seconds had done more than shift a legal strategy. They had ripped open the curtain, revealing the machinery behind headlines and talking points. The cold gears of reputation warfare, silence, dressed in civility. And even as the dust began to settle, Jonathan knew this story was never just about him, or Matt Walsh, or a courtroom. It had become something bigger, a question every person in the country had to face. When power strikes without truth, who do you stand with? 2 weeks after the judge dismissed the case, Jonathan stood in a high school gymnasium in Las Cruces, New Mexico. He wasn't there as an actor, not as a trending headline, just as a man who had walked through fire and still had something worth saying. He leaned against the edge of the podium. No notes, no script. You don't have to be perfect to stand your ground, he told them. You just have to know why you're standing. The room was still. No phones out, no side whispers, just wide eyes and still hands. A student raised his hand. Were you scared? Jonathan paused, then answered with quiet truth. Yeah, but not for me. For what it means when people with power think they can decide what's true just by suing someone. It wasn't Congress. It wasn't a national broadcast, but it mattered because the case had left the courtroom. It had spilled into living rooms, classrooms, barbershops, and group chats. And it stayed there. The court of law had ruled in his favor. But the court of public memory, it went further. It turned the case into a warning and a mirror, a reflection of how fragile free speech becomes when the people using it have more courage than protection. In the weeks that followed, 3 other public figures came forward, not with lawsuits, but with stories, quiet pressure, whisper networks, media campaigns bankrolled by deep pockets and shadow donors. And Garrett Wynn's name surfaced again, this time in an op-ed for The Atlantic. Title, Truth Costs More Than Silence. He never mentioned the case. He didn't have to. He wrote about fear, about the machine, and about the moment he chose to step outside of it. The memo was now part of public record, archived, studied, dissected. Some law schools had already added Roumie v. Walsh to their curriculum under a new and growing category, political lawfare. Lawsuits not designed to win, but to exhaust. As for Matt Walsh, he faded, slowly, deliberately. No interviews, no reappearance, no comeback tour. His team issued one final statement. We've chosen to move on and focus on positive engagement. But people remembered, not because of who he was, but because of what he tried and how it failed. Inside Jonathan's office, life moved forward. Bills to read, hearings to prepare, communities to serve. But something had shifted. People who used to linger in the back of the room now stepped forward. They shook his hand, looked him in the eye. One woman from Amarillo sent a handwritten letter. Thank you for standing up when most of us feel too small to speak. Jonathan didn't frame it, didn't post it online. He just folded it once and tucked it into the side of his briefcase. Not because it made him proud, but because it reminded him of the stakes. One night, Theo walked into the office. Jonathan was still working. He dropped a folder on the desk. What's this? Next speaking request. From who? Theo smiled. Georgetown. They want you to guest lecture next month. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Me? Teach? Theo smirked. Seems like they finally figured out you've got something to say. Jonathan laughed, soft and tired, but full. Let's hope they're ready to hear it. Because that was the truth. It was never just about winning a lawsuit. It was about what people remembered after, what they carried forward. This case taught something deeper. Truth doesn't always shout louder than money, but when it's protected, even by one voice, in one moment, it survives long enough to be heard. So the next time power tries to silence truth by dragging it into a courtroom, maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice. Not out of fear, but because it doesn't work like it used to. People are watching now. They're listening. And maybe that's the real shift. If you believe truth matters, even when it's messy, even when it's hard, don't look away. This won't be the last time. But if you're listening, it won't be ignored either. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that truth still matters, even in a world of noise and power plays, then you're not alone. Here on this channel, we tell the stories that others try to silence. Stories of courage, faith, and the quiet strength that shakes the system. If you believe in the power of truth, justice, and storytelling that stands for something, hit that subscribe button. Join a growing community that refuses to look away. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because the next voice they try to silence might just be the one that needs to be heard the most. Stand with truth, stay awake, and stay subscribed. We'll see you in the next one.